The mysterious flying objects remain unidentified to this day. Like, what does that look like to you, Andrew?
Yeah.
Just like what would it be?
That looks to me like some kind of delivery vehicle. A delivery vehicle meaning like a missile, a rocket.
This was the crazy one.
Because they move so fast, right?
It dropped like 30,000 feet in a second. The videos were, I can't even read that.
It looks like the little breath mint in large.
Pause this, Rob.
But white, oblong.
See right there. She's watching that. That thing is going a gazillion miles an hour. She's like, hey, this looks like a breath mint.
Right.
You ever look at it that way?
No.
I never.
That's why. Yeah, that's why
I look at it like this object that drops 30,000 feet in a second. Wow. Not, hey, it looks like a breath mint. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's loaded with a missile that we can't see. I mean,
So,
that's what I would be thinking.
a couple
right?
things are important here, right? And this is me getting a little bit out of school, right? Helping you get into the heads of the military. What you're listening to right now, the fact that they're calm, the fact that she's trying to come up with objective ways of describing it, this declassified footage is not the first footage. Think about that. The first footage would be like, oh shit, man, I don't know what this thing is. It could be a missile, it could be whatever. That's not what they declassified. What they declassified was video number 12, 15, 18, 25, 200. Who knows what video number this is? But they declassified something, but that doesn't mean that they declassified the first video of it. And that's important because if they chose to declassify this, there's a reason. What's the reason? What benefit does the government have? What benefit does the Navy have for releasing this footage?
What would you say?
I would say that this is a Chinese hypersonic missile, and they wanted to send a message to the Chinese to say, we know you're developing something new.
I agree with that.
So we're going to send a message to the world. We're going to call it a UFO so it doesn't turn into a diplomatic issue. We're going to show the footage so that you know we're watching it. We know it's there, and there's all sorts of classified footage, classified conversations, classified documentation that we're not going to leak, but we're going to selectively leak this to send a message to you that it's out there. And what happened?
We caught it on the radar long enough where we could have blasted it if we wanted to, we think.
Potentially.
But might be able to turn quick.
But to me, it's highly suspicious, leaning towards causation, that the reason the hypersonic missile race picked up in 2022 was because in 2021 the DoD filed this giant UFO report that Congress asked for. So now all of a sudden the U.S. military was like, we can't really keep this secret anymore. Let's go ahead and make the whole world know that we know hypersonic missiles exist and that the Chinese already have them, the Russians might already have them, and we don't really have them yet, but they're under development. That's an embarrassing story. So they don't want to have that story until...
So you redirect. Wow. I really did think that. I was going back and forth, but I thought it was military.
Yeah.
Play this, Rob.
No apparent flight control surfaces, no apparent visible means of propulsion, and
Calm as can
So
be.
pause there for me too. So this is important also. We're listening to a voice and we're watching a video. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the voice we're listening to is watching the same video that we're watching.
Yeah.
When you hear her say things like, there's no apparent flight controls, there's no apparent exhaust, right? I don't know about you. I would feel like an asshole if I looked at a blurry dot from a far distance and tried to make the conclusion that there's no flight control.
Well, could she see through it?
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So what I think is happening here is that the recording that we're listening to is either part of a multi-image, like there were 3 different types, because most devices on an aircraft that observe in multiple visual spectrums. They observe infrared, they observe main visual, they observe with ultra lenses that really that have focal points that allow them to zoom in. So more likely, she's making an assessment watching multiple screens with multiple feeds. And this is just the blurriest feed. This is the one that could be declassified because they didn't want to show the ultra high resolution one.
Right. And also, for all we know, this could be like B-roll.
Correct.
You know, and if somebody doesn't know what B-roll is, it's just a video, and then there's somebody speaking over the video.
Right.
You know, and she could have a script right there, right to say.
I mean, I wouldn't worry about a script. That seems like a lot of work. And
or just talk about it,
but
right?
yeah, it
Calmly.
It could be the footage that didn't make the final cut,
Yeah.
right? And they were like, we don't really like this one, so let's take it again.
Yeah.
Let's make a better one because it's going to Congress. But this one was kind of shitty, so we'll let this go to the American
We'll
people.
let this go. Yeah. Finish this one off, Rob.
Nice, but we couldn't classify, we couldn't identify.
Yeah, she's way too calm.
Yeah, and it also sounds like she's being interviewed. You saw that at the end, right?
Yeah.
So she's justifying or defending herself. So it sounds like that's part of an interrogation or part of like a congressional debrief sort of thing.
Well, you broke that down real quick. Last time you didn't want to talk anything UFO, but it's a real thing now.
Yeah.
In some way, shape or form. I was watching. I wanted to ask you about this. I was watching. Mike Baker.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw him on, I guess it was Rogan, and he was saying that the Chinese now. This reverts back to what you were saying. They have supersonic missiles. I don't know if is that considered a nuke?
No, hypersonic missile just means it's a missile that can fly at fast speeds at low altitudes.
Okay. He was talking about that the Chinese have supersonic missiles that are faster than the speed of sound, whereas before we would have maybe 30 minutes to detect it, kill it, shoot it down, right? Now it's so fast that by the time we would detect it, it would already be in the United States, and it's so quick that if it looks like it's going to New York and say we catch it for that split second, it could turn and just hit New Jersey and destroy it.
Right.
Would you agree with that?
So
he says that it's fact.
Yeah, that's the risk with hypersonic missiles. My understanding is that they do not have the control yet that makes it so they can make rapid directional changes. That the pressure on the airframe itself is so significant that once they're at full speed, actually redirecting them is very difficult. But the whole point about being able to launch them without being detected, that's accurate. That's what makes them so dangerous, because we're used to looking for high-speed projectiles at altitude. These are high-speed projectiles at low altitude.
And by the time we can detect it, it's already about to hit.
Correct.
As of now.
Correct. So that becomes very difficult to defend against. It becomes a very scary concept. Could it be equipped with a nuclear warhead? Yes. But then you end up, if you equip it with a nuclear warhead, you have a completely different kind of weapon, right? A weapon that no one has seen before, because all nuclear-equipped deliverables essentially go into the atmosphere and then come back down. High-altitude projectile, right? So it makes perfect sense to me why folks are scared, and it makes perfect sense to me why when you associate, when you correlate what was happening here in UFO findings with what we now know has been happening in recent history with military development, the two have strong overlap, right?
Really strong.
Really strong
Because
overlap.
now all of a sudden you're seeing all these videos that are doing massive things. Now we know that China, maybe they can't redirect it yet as far as we know, but we know they can get here without us detecting them.
Or maybe they can redirect it and it just hasn't been made public yet.
Right.
Probably
the most likely of the two.
Because that's just one of those things. And I appreciate Mike Baker every time he goes out there and in the public sphere. But if my true professional intelligence side is that if we don't know something for sure, then we don't ever commit to it for sure. We can talk about probabilities, we can talk about likelihoods, but we don't ever say something is for certain. And one thing for sure about Mike Baker is he is not in a position where he now has access to current classified top secret information, specifically because he goes on Joe Rogan to talk about it.
Yeah.
The government's not going to give him TS/SCI when they know he's that public. There's too much room for mistake.
They always joke around that he's supposedly out of the CIA. I don't know if he is or not. But if he is still in the CIA, like you said, they're not going to tell him the heavy shit if he's going on Joe Rogan. Like, if you were still in the CIA, would they allow you to come on a podcast?
So
maybe
they
set
might.
somebody up.
Yeah, they might. They might. But I think the bigger thing is
glad you're not in the CIA.
The bigger thing is
just kidding.
There's very few people that were vetted by CIA. Like, that's one of the things that I'm very proud of with my own business and my own background, is that CIA has come out and said, yeah, he's legit, right? There's plenty of vetting out there that shows where it's happened. I've got documentation that proves it. I've got all sorts of stuff that proves it. I'm always a little bit skeptical of the folks out there who are like, I used to be with CIA, but they don't have anything that proves it. Because CIA can source lots of different people. They can literally just go tap an engineer on the shoulder and say, hey, we need your help for 2 weeks. Does that mean that that engineer is now with the CIA?
I don't think he went through hyperthermia or some of the shit that Rick was telling us, and we were like, whoa. Yeah, I don't think that guy for 2 weeks, no, I don't think he's CIA.
Right, and that's how it works. So CIA can tap on a military person, they can tap on a drone pilot, they can tap on a chemical engineer, they can tap on anybody who has a U.S. passport and basically say, hey, we need you for a few weeks or a few months to come do the thing, and then we're going to get rid of you, right? And it's called being co-opted, right? You're brought in, you're given a security brief about something, and then you're sent out. You're not a professional intelligence officer. And that's really important because there's a number of folks out there. And now that I am also a public figure with an intelligence background, it's very, very hard for me whenever I go and I have to justify or kind of speak to the credibility of some of these folks, because I'm like, I don't know. I don't know that one, and he hasn't shown me anything to prove it. So I can't say that I knew him. I knew him when.
Yeah. When I showed you Rick, you go, he's a fucking legend. Of course I know him.
Yeah.
And I said to Rick, I said, I had him in. He goes, oh, yeah, he looks familiar. You know, you guys are like your own brotherhood.
Yeah, well, that's because Rick was paramilitary. I was paramilitary when I left, and that's a really, really small unit, right? And those are folks who operate under a different set of intelligence rules than your mainstream intelligence rules. And I was lucky because I was mainstream intelligence with an Air Force background at a time when our covert action wing needed somebody with an Air Force background. So that was the only reason I got to cross the barrier into the paramilitary world. But once you cross that barrier, then you start to see they just work differently.
If you like this short clip, make sure you click here to see the next clip or here to see the full podcast episode.